Okay, you all see the
I
slides?
see it. Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Um, you can see this is inset from the on the right-hand side. He's an acclaimed award-winning nonfiction books author. He's written The Golden Spruce, The Tiger, national bestsellers, The Jaguar's Children, and so on. And those are a lot of awards. Um, so um, he looks like a pretty intense intellectual kind of guy, and he certainly lives up to his intensity looks. He's a pretty remarkable book, in my opinion. So let me go on to some slides. It's important that you know your way around Canadian geography a bit. Um, this area, if you can follow my arrow up here, the orange area is the Athabasca oil sands. Some of us call it tar sands to give it a slightly worse tone. Um, and Fort McMurray is right in the heart of it, although most of the mining that you'll see about is a little bit to the north. But there's a vast area here. And what makes it very special is it's superficial tar. Mackenzie was not the first explorer. He's got the Mackenzie River named after him. There were explorers before him. I think Mackenzie may have been the first one to take a 20 or 30-foot pole and just stick it down in the sand and realize that the oil was so thick, excuse me, in the tar and the sands, that it would support this pole in a vertical position. But everybody realized that it was in far off in the wilderness. That's 600 miles north of the American-Canadian border. And so everybody pretty much realized it was going to be a long time before we harvested that oil, but we did, and it's been coming along in pipelines for quite a few years now. And worse, a lot of politicians, both in the American government and Canadian government, invested heavily in it through the many oil companies that had invested in it. And consequently, there's all this talk about climate change and what we can do to divest and so on, but it's much harder to stop what's bringing us in our investment dividends every year or month or whatever. So it has been very successfully mined because of its superficiality. You just scrape off the top forest layer, and it's right there in the tar sands. We'll show some pictures of that later.
Richard,
Yeah.
can I just make a, didn't this exist quite a number of years before fracking? I mean, we were really relying on that oil before the fracking kind of took over in more recent years. Is that true?
Well, they're two different things. This is oil. Fracking is for methane, and so they're related, but they're two different products. This has been around. It's been discovered a couple of hundred years ago. They had no good way of getting it out. It's a lot harder to get out in this thick form. They still have to refine it a little bit and heat it up before they can get it into a pipe and ship it abroad. It's been piped across Canada to um, Lake Superior and then gone into boats going down from Lake Superior through the system. And there have also been pipelines from Lake Superior, some of them getting very close to Madison as it goes down to Chicago. So
could I say something?
Yeah. Sure.
Later on in the story, he talks about, I forget the exact year, but a couple of years after the fire, business starts to taper off for the type of oil in the sand. So it's been a diminishing returns recently. I'm not sure what all the economics are about that, but there was significant divestment for funding, et cetera. So that was in the latter quarter of the book.
Yes, I read that too. And yet when I went online, um, and looked outside the book for their production of oil, they anticipated going up. So there's a bit of a conflict there. He may have given impressions that were earlier, but apparently in 2023, I think they hit a record, and they're expecting to this year in 2024. I'll have a slide on that at the end. So I don't think it's been a major drop, maybe to United States because of the pipeline issues. They've been blocked in trying to send it over the mountains to a Pacific terminal, which they want to build, and that's been blocked mostly by native Canadians. But they are shipping also to outside North America, so it could be we're looking at different statistics.
Well,
One
the
of the-
Richard,
Keystone,
did I misunderstand you, or did you say that fracking was used only for gas?
Mostly for gas, yes.
Because I was just looking it up online. They say that's used for extracting oil, natural gas, geothermal energy, or water from
Yeah,
deep
that's
underground.
correct. But oil has a lot of varieties. This is very thick oil. It's
Yeah.
tar, and
Yeah.
you can't frack for tar. You've got to get it in much better condition. It's all they can do to get it into the pipeline without fracking. You don't need to frack this stuff. It's right there on the surface.
Yeah, well, Richard, my point was they were competitive. They were not mixed. I mean, the
Absolutely.
fracking was independent of these oil sands were really providing a lot of oil before fracking became
Correct.
popular. And
Correct.
how did the U.S. become a #1 oil producer without fracking? We couldn't have. We couldn't have in recent years.
I wouldn't call us a #1 oil producer. We're a #1 methane producer.
Well,
Be careful of your wording.
well, I'm
no,
not sure.
I've checked that out. We were #1 in terms of oil for maybe not the last 2 years, but prior to that, we certainly were.
Yeah, during
Yeah.
the Trump administration, we were, because we became energy independent during the Trump administration.
Right.
I think that was largely methane.
Oh.
Well, we had a big problem with just flaring methane because we were extracting the oil and we had become an exporting country.
Yes.
And the Keystone Pipeline was to take the product from the tar sands.
So what's the consensus that I'm hearing? I'm not sure I'm getting a consensus from your discussion.
We are a major oil exporter, and it's largely due to fracking.
I'll agree with that.
I agree with that.
I do too.
Yes.
Okay, we're on the same wavelength then.
And
But
used
that-
to be until the Biden administration took over, and they
We're
were.
not going to get into politics here.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
not saying.
And that meant a lot of methane was flared.
I want to toss in a comment here. So I'm sitting here looking at data online. Okay, so in 2023, according to what I'm looking at, the U.S. produced 12.9 million barrels per day of oil. In 2022, the United States produced 11.9 billion million barrels of oil per day. That's in relation to Saudi Arabia in 2022 of 10.6 million barrels per day. In 2023, as I said, the U.S. produced 12.9 million barrels per day. Saudi Arabia in 2023 produced 9.1 million barrels per day. Russia actually exceeded Saudi Arabia. In fact, as far as I know, Lee, the United States right now is producing much more oil per day than they did in the Trump years. So be careful what you conclude without looking at the actual data.
Okay,
All right.
let's move on for now through the slides. The basic point I'm trying to give you is the geography of the Athabasca tar sands. I'm just going to make a little point that my last slide will show up here in the North Territories, they're already in fire season, and people are being ordered to leave their homes. And of course, the good people of Fort McMurray are saying, we'll help you out. If you want to come down here, we'll put you up. But so there's a definite attitude of togetherness and support of one another. But this is already, this happened, what we're going to read about in the book, in May of 2016. Here we are in March of
2024.
Yeah, 2024, and they've already got, and we don't hear about it. Sometimes we say, oh, the air is a little smoky here, but even though it does cloud our air from time to time, it's not in the news, only when it's in California. So this fire, I never heard about when it happened in 2016. I have lots of friends in British Columbia and some in Alberta, and didn't hear about it until I read this book. So it certainly didn't make the American news very, very importantly. So this is a map anyway of where it all is. And this is part of the boreal forest that we don't often think about. It girds the northern hemisphere in a circumpolar band. Alberta has the largest terrestrial boreal ecosystem at 6 million square miles, makes up 1/3 of Canada. It's a shifting mix of pines, spruce, aspen, poplar, and birch, rarely more than 60 feet high. We think of these redwoods in California, but this is much lower stuff. It contains more fresh water than any other biome. It stores more carbon than the tropics. In spite of the water around it in the ground, the trees burn down on a regular basis. And so it's been described as a phoenix. It's an interesting view looking down on this boreal forest from the air. This is an example of the way he writes, man's relationship with fire. The degree to which we have mastered life borders on the magical, and in this way, with minimum training, we've all become casual wizards. And this begs the question, is fire alive? And he goes through these criteria. Fire is animate. It can be propagated by others of its kind. It can generate offspring. It grows. It travels in search of nourishment. It can adapt to changing conditions. It can die of starvation and or suffocation. It can be killed or revived. It can turn on its master, who might not be its master at all. So interesting collection of phrases that does give it sort of a magical tone as something that we've been living with for a long time. Come to one of the main companies, Syncrude, and their haulers. I'm going to have a larger picture of these squares here that are haulers. They're pretty amazing things. But basically, these are some interesting statistics. Canada is the 4th largest oil producer in the world and the 3rd largest exporter. I grew up and was educated in Canada, and I wasn't aware of these statistics. It came as a shocker to me. Almost 1/2 of U.S. imports come from Canada, 4 million barrels of oil per day. Almost 90% of these imports come from Fort McMurray, and there are 66,000 people living there, just south of the mines. The city is the 4th largest in the North American subarctic. It's an island of industry and an ocean of trees, 5 hours away from a major city or source of assistance. That's a real setup for the story, but still a reality. The median household income, he did emphasize this, $200,000 a year. This is median. And these are people, whether they're working in heavy machinery or in management or other aspects, they have a pretty good income, and their houses are fairly new, built with a lot of synthetic plastics, which are great fuel for fire. The haulers that you see here in the foreground weigh 400 tons. They have tires 13 feet tall. They cost $85,000 each. And I'll show you a close-up in the next picture here, a 400-ton hauler. Pretty amazing machine. This fire got a name, 009, in early May. May the 2nd was a very hot day, And so it was given a name as an early fire. It flickered to life 5 miles southwest of town. The residents nearby watched from their barbecues and didn't think very much about it. What made this fire unusual, though, by nightfall on May the 2nd, was that it was growing rapidly. It was like a high-grade cancer and doubled in size to 10 square miles, and sent out embers across the Athabasca River and started new fires closer to town. I'll show you a map in a few minutes. By noon of the next day, a smoke-suppressing inversion had lifted, and the fire intensity rose to rank 4. And this is the rank that you have here, the one in the middle, and it shows the lower parts of the forest, the understory, in flames, but hadn't quite caught the upper ones yet. It subsequently, of course, went to rank 4 and 5, but by the end of the first day, it changed from something like these two up to a rank 4 and was on its way rapidly to a rank 5. This is the view from the resident vehicles as they were ordered to leave. Some residents were unable to mentally grasp the reality of this disaster coming down their street. Some of them were busy in their daytime occupations, and some people only learned about it from warnings on social media. It was quite a shock to come out and be told that you have to leave and pack up your things quickly and leave. This is pretty drastic stuff because these people came back, I'll show you in a few minutes, and there wasn't very much left to rescue, let alone losing household pets and furniture, all their precious belongings. Here is a map, and we're going to hear a good bit as you read through the story of these areas: Beacon Hill, Abasand Heights. The fire started here that I talked about, 009, and some embers drifted north across and started to work their way up into here. And this street here, I'm going to show you in the next slide. It's pretty dramatic. A lot of businesses, including some of the fire halls and are along this line. And this is an important highway that goes through the edge of town and up toward the mines to the north. It was hard to get very far south. It didn't lead to Calgary. This was the way up to the mines and then from there. And so they really were, they could go either way. And some of the people did go south, but it didn't get them very, very far. So here we have Prospect Drive. I showed you at the top of the slide, way up there, the very top of the slide, Prospect Drive. And that's what it looked like within 3 minutes. You can see some trees in the background. Each home on this brand new street loaded with flammable conveniences was totally consumed within 3 minutes. Now, this is pretty dramatic, the rate at which this fire burned, and that was discussed in great detail. Statistics of the fire: 2,500 residential units and 22 commercial spaces were destroyed. Nobody died, but 2 people did die exiting in a car crash. But nobody died directly from the fire. Household goods and pets, most were lost. The 5-year update is that 86% of destroyed properties were rebuilt. That's a pretty impressive rebuild. 10 recommendations were mostly achieved, except for building a second highway. That cost $1 billion, and it's debatable whether that will ever get done, but the people would feel much more secure. This is the last slide that I was going to show you after our discussion, but in case I don't, this is a line here between Northwest Territories and Alberta, and we're not looking directly at Fort McMurray here, but people are being asked to leave, and Alberta is helping to accept them. But as of 2023, Canada's oil sands were projected to increase this year by 10%, and to a record high of 53 million barrels per day. The Trans Mountain pipeline has been delayed and might yet happen. Mortgage and insurance payments are still due, and sometimes very depressing for people trying to cope with that. New evacuees in the Northwest Territories, as I mentioned here, are welcomed in Fort McMurray. So those are my slides. I'm going to stop the share and come back to any comments anybody would like to make from there. I think the number of barrels per day is interesting, but I particularly like people to comment not only on their impressions on the book, but also what they thought of the last 100 pages. Were you all as surprised as I was by it? And what were your thoughts about how well that subject was covered? Anyone?
I didn't read the book, but why would anybody build a house when they can have a nice, large mobile home that could escape the fire, hopefully?
A number of people did that, but I think they wanted to spread out a little bit. Nobody ever didn't dawn on them that a fire would, they'd have fires all around them, but they'd always been able to suppress them. This fire was unusual in that they didn't have fire departments from neighboring cities, and they didn't have the benefit of hindsight that you and I have now. So that's perhaps why. It's a good.
But there was a large rebuild.
Pardon?
But there was a large amount of rebuilding.
Yes, there was. That's a good point.
It reminded me a lot of the Peshtigo fire of 150 years earlier. They had a huge fuel load, mostly of their own making. They knew that it was a problem because they'd had small fires for a couple of years, and they were relying on the staff they had. So, I mean, there is some history to look at, and they didn't look at it very hard.
That's true. Jacqueline, we don't know you very well. You're a new member of our group. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself while we have you on the line, and what attracted you to this group?
I'm calling from Lake Mills. I'm a retired judge. I was looking for a science-related class, and here I am.
Well, welcome. Thank you for your input from Lake Peshtigo. Very good.
No, I'm from Lake Mills, and I was just talking about that
Right.
1871 fire up in Peshtigo.
Yes. Yes.
Bigger than the Chicago fire
Exactly.
Yeah.
at the same day.
So Richard, one question I had, did the fire actually have any fuel from the oil, or was there no oil tar sand in that exact area?
The latter. No tar sands in that area, and no, that did not provide any fuel. It was purely forest and homes. Yes, Dottie?
They also mentioned I was going to say something else, but I'll mention regarding Mert's comment. They said that the tar sands as they are not very flammable until significant purification occurs anyway. So the trees are a much bigger problem with their sap. He mentioned the particular pines. I forget what they were called. Do you remember the type of pines they were? They're kind of like
black spruce was the one that he mentioned.
They're kind of like tar on a stick is the way that they kind of describe them. I think one of the things that was pointed out is that we're in a new era of fires caused by man. And this was one of the earlier indications of how the language that we have and the systems set up are no longer adequate for modern fire. And that there was a lack of awareness about the interface between the forest and communities. A lot of communities are built very near forests in the West, and this is going to be of increasing concern. So I think a lot of the 100 years ago when Fort McMurray was being built, nobody thought about those sorts of things.
And the insurance companies might have a lot of indirect influence on people's choices because the insurance rates will reflect the risk. Yes, Don Reeder.
I read in the Times last week or so about the zombie fires and the fact that the fire is still burning under the ground, under the snow. And
Wow.
it's going to be continual, apparently, more like COVID than it was. And so I wonder, is the insurance companies evaluated that, the recurrence? I mean, we're rebuilding to provide burnable materials.
Yes. I would think that the insurance companies have pretty intelligent people looking into things like that. How and that will reflect on their rates. Now, where are these zombie fires? Are they talking about California mostly?
No, they were talking about Canada, and it was Canada where they were under the snow, and it was quotes from the forestry ministries in Canada.
Okay.
Our author did mention, he didn't use the term zombie fire, but he described how the undergrowth, how these fires could get down deep and sort of smolder away. And I don't remember where in the book he mentioned how deep and I don't know, it's not really permafrost, but it has permafrost-like qualities in terms of the biomass. So I think he said something about it, but I like the idea of zombie fire because it really,
Yeah.
I think, describes it well.
Just a quick comment. I grew up on a farm where we had peat, some acreage of peat, and if that catches on fire, watch out. It doesn't go out. It can keep burning like that. So it's like if there are bogs or any of that kind of thing that dried out, yeah, you would have that kind of zombie situation.
Well, we have fires like that in northeastern Pennsylvania in the coal mining area. Fires that have been started decades ago and are expected to burn for 100 years.
Somebody got a phone ringing. You could mute for a little bit if you would.
Yep, that's me.
Yeah. Jeff, yes.
It's Steve.
Another one of the things about the unprecedented nature of this was that this was in May in northern Alberta, and the temperature was about 90 degrees in May in northern Alberta, where it's, they usually have snow on the ground, and the average temperature was maybe 60. And on top of that, they're in sort of a drought. So conditions are, the forest is drier than normal.
Yes.
And the humidity was extremely low.
Yep.
Around between 10 and 15%. And combine that with strong winds, high temperatures, dry conditions, and the heat from the fire becomes. It talked a lot about the sort of the meteorological effects of this type of fire, where previously fires of the past have not had the creation of pyrocumulonimbus clouds, and this is a recent phenomenon, and along with it, we are seeing. I think there's a little dispute on what they're actually called, but they're like fire tornadoes. Actual tornadoes that are created from these pyrocumulonimbus clouds, and these create even greater destruction, not only from the wind. There's a description of winds of being 160 miles per hour in this tornado, and this spreads the fire and creates even more destruction, and the speed with which the fire progresses. The description of it was just terrifying.
I think that's where we get the name of the book, Fire Weather.
Exactly.
I thought it was a peculiar name for a book until I got to those passages and began to realize the significance of it. you make a very good point, Jeff, and I'm glad you brought that up. It that suggests that this is just the beginning. That it's not just a freak event. It's going to happen more and more because the fire changes the weather. I mean, to think of 15% humidity, we in Wisconsin, it just blows us away. Our kids have moved. Just a minute. I'll be able to see what you got, Alan. Just let me finish. They all left Madison because they said it was too humid and hot here, and they've moved west. But I think they're some of them are finding it more humid and hotter than Wisconsin as they went west. But there is that title. It made me curious as to why he chose that title until I read those remarks. So they're very good to point out, Jeff. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Alan, you were holding up your phone. Sorry, I wasn't ready for it.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but it just so happens that it's not on there anymore, but there is a fire warning alert that came up on my weather radar app for today. A severe chance of fire. See if I can get it to come back up again. Yeah, special weather statement, and there's a very high fire danger level today for a vast part of the Midwest.
Oh, wow.
Huh. I don't know if y'all can see that, but there's
no.
Not really.
Anyway, it's just the point that I've been seeing these fire alerts for the past month or so. They come up anytime it's warm and windy. Stuff is ready to toast.
So when they say, did they specifically say southern Wisconsin?
It basically lists a lot of counties.
It says elevated fire weather conditions for southern Wisconsin. Uses the term fire weather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Richard, I had a question. On those underground fires, what's the source of oxygen? I mean, is that due to oxygen-containing compounds breaking down slowly, and that's why it kind of smolders, or how is oxygen supplied?
Yes, I think it's a combination of both. There's a little oxygen down there. Has to be a little layer in between the molecules of earth and fungus and all the constituents. There's a little oxygen there, and it will be consumed by a large fire. But if it's just a little ember, it might sort of keep it going. We talked about campfires since we were Boy and Girl Scouts, how these things can sometimes creep along roots underground. And so that's part of it there, but this certainly takes it another level.
Just if I could add something, that the peat is very light.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of air mixed in with peat, and certain other types of soil.
Right.
That's an interesting point, Lee, you make, that maybe some of these compounds release oxygen as they can start combusting.
That too, yeah.
Could I say something? I thought that the book was interesting because partly it was specifically about the fire and the generation of fire, but another portion of it was sort of a long history of our knowledge about how burning carbon affects the atmosphere. And it was a nice history lesson for me. I've never really read all the background historically of who first discovered the effects of carbon dioxide and the whole history that he built up, as he interwove it among stories about the fire. I thought that was very interesting, and probably I'll take away more from the history of our environmental crisis than I will specifically about the Fort McMurray fire. That was just, I wonder if
Thank you for that. Yeah, I value this book now more than I thought I would. And for those of you who couldn't get it from the library and ended up buying your own copy, you're probably feeling a bit like me. This is a keeper. And I don't feel cheated that I invested some money in having my own copy where I was able to highlight a few little things and put in some little stickies where I wanted to go back and read some more. And as you said, Dottie, there are a lot of people mentioned in this book dealing with the history of climate change that I had missed and not captured anywhere else. This guy did a fantastic job of reviewing the history of climate change.
Richard?
Go ahead.
This is Steve Shellen. I was going to Google underground fires, and I started to type in underground fires, and when I got to that point, a list came up of Pennsylvania, Florida, Colorado, Michigan, New Orleans, Pennsylvania town, Alberta, British Columbia.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's not a
yeah.
local issue.
Yeah, it's widespread, but I mean, this moisture issue is a huge part of it. Whether you have water table reductions or just dry condition, the moisture is really can fuel that kind of underground combustion, I would think.
Yeah,
You know.
I would.
Regarding the fire that I was looking for, it's Centralia mine fire in a coal seam has been burning in the labyrinth of the abandoned coal mine in Centralia, Pennsylvania since May 27th, 1962.
Oh my God.
And it's expected to
aware of
burn
that.
for 100 years.
Oh, well, it must be contained, or you'd
Yes.
think they'd be mitigating it somehow.
Cannot contain it.
Well, I mean, contained to a point where it's not impinging on population or anything like that.
Well,
Alan?
Centralia's gone.
Oh,
Yeah, I've heard of Centralia in Ontario, but not in Wisconsin. Yeah, Alan, you have a point.
Oh, it's Pennsylvania.
It's
Okay.
It's something that I didn't hear brought up here because it really had nothing to do with forest fires, and that is that we've had a lot here about the Canadian sand tar pits, which I did some research on once upon a time for my newspaper column. And just the idea of oil sands sounds icky, and it really is. And the only reason that they can turn it into petroleum at all is because the Canadians have so much methane that it's essentially free. They have more than they can sell. And so they use it to heat up the oil sands and then have some sort of screening process for it. And it's a really inferior oil. You'll hear people like in upstate New York that, yeah, you can go over to Canada and get Canadian gasoline, but it's not as good as that in the United States because it's the BTU content of their oil products is lower, and it's full of more carbon and stuff. So it's really messy stuff, and there's a big environmental impact just from burning all the methane to make this stuff. So it's not a win-win for sure.
No,
yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that too. And Venezuelan oil is sort of in the same boat. Not a lot of refineries can deal with any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. See, it's interesting how we can pick up little things. I was surprised to find in reading this book that British Columbia is twice the size of California. I mean, I've driven around a little bit in the interior of British Columbia as a young student. I had no idea that it was twice the size of California. That's a lot of land, but we don't hear of the forest fires there. And I think it's because that's on the west side of the mountains. There's a little of course, a coastal range, but then so there's still a lot of moisture over British Columbia. But then when it gets over into Alberta, that's the line of maximum altitude between the two provinces, is between Alberta and British Columbia. So once it gets over into Alberta and the Northwest Territories, it's much drier over there. And so that's why we're hearing much more of it there than in British Columbia itself. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. We had all this smoke last summer. Was that coming from Canadian fires last summer? And where were those fires? Where
They
were
were
they?
mostly in Alberta. Some were in Manitoba, by the way. And those are the ones where we got it the worst from the Manitoba fires.
Uh,
You know where Manitoba is, right? Just north of the Dakotas.
oh,
So
okay.
much
Yeah.
closer.
They were a
Weren't there-
nuisance. I was up in Wisconsin then. Wisconsin got hit. I mean,
Yeah.
Illinois got hit at times in Chicago. They were just nasty.
That's
They
right.
were not good.
I think there were fires in eastern Canada also, right? Because New York and Maine and that eastern area had a lot of smoke.
Yes, I think there's some in New York. I don't recall elsewhere, but there, I do remember New York State had some. Yeah.
Because my grandson was scheduled to fly to New York with a group from his school, a couple hundred people, and their flight couldn't leave Boston because there was no visibility.
I think a lot of the worst smoke last year was from fires in Ontario. And like in New York City, it was like dusk during the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Was that Ben?
Okay, so what can we do to prevent this sort of thing? I wonder. People have talked about cutting back on the use of toilet paper. That's a tough thing to do, and unless everybody uses a bidet, you're bound to go through a lot of toilet paper, and that does come from trees, right? Is there a way to synthesize toilet paper without growing trees?
But
Richard, you could go
see-
back to corn cobs like they used to use.
I don't see how that relates to the forest fires because we're going to leave forests unharvested,
Yeah.
in these wide open areas. I think it's going to have to be more in human behavior about where we put buildings and what safety features we put in place and what kind of things we put in our homes. Because I was a little bit surprised by them comparing old-fashioned furniture, which is still flammable, compared to new furniture, which has a lot of plastics and lacquers and veneers and things on it. So that would be a way that we could attack the flammability issue. I'm not sure that we can really prevent the starting of the fires in the first place.
Yeah, I think some of the points that he made is that about the boreal forest is that there have been fires up in the boreal forest since they were. That's why they're only 40 feet high, because there's spontaneous fires that happen with lightning, and you're always going to have some fires up there. But the fact that I think you put, Dottie, is that we're building homes right in these forests, and then we're building the homes with plasticized furniture, and the two combined really feed the fires. Yeah, that's your basic point.
Yes, and I think, I think the safety features, for one thing that I thought about, I wondered why they didn't have some sort of at least electronic warning system like we have for tornadoes. But I think that they were so unaware anyway that there'd have been no one to sound the tornado warnings because the fire officials were a bit blasé about what was going to happen. If you can believe the comments that they were making, they kept reassuring the public to go about their regular duties when they should have been getting their to-go bags ready and beating it out of town. So you have to have better education of the people in charge and better warning systems as well, I think.
I think that I think this goes back to the point that that these types of fires are unprecedented in past history, and that's what. So the fire officials, while they knew of the fire, they were fighting the fire, but they just weren't prepared for the nature of the temperatures that they had, the dryness, and the heat from the fire itself. It's just they just aren't, it's kind of like, I think this is one of the other points in his book, where we as humans look at what we know, and we don't comprehend well what we don't know. And this fire was something that they just was of a nature that they didn't know.
Yeah, very good point.
Kind of like the Maui fires. I mean, that was low-level sage or something, right? An invasive plant that kept growing and dried out. But that just took everybody by surprise too.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Well, we have finally recognized, I think, that fires in forests are part of the cycle of nature, which for decades we had suppression, and the underbrush grew up to the point where the fires that came were unable to be suppressed because there was so much fire material. And fires start naturally with lightning strikes and other things. I was in Alaska last summer, and the black pine, you drive along the roads and you can just tell where the fires were, about how long ago they were by the regrowth underneath. And on a tour of Anchorage, we were reminded that Anchorage has a fire break all around the city that separates the inner city from the outer city, and even that did not prevent some jumping across that fire break, which is a fairly large vacant area of a circle around the city. And they've had some fires there this summer.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You would think California would have a lot of lessons learned here. Some of you would think they've been dealing with this so long.
Yeah.
And somebody in the university system there should have done a lot of publishing about studies and publishing about this kind of thing.
They build on hillsides and recognize that they're going to slide down, and they still rebuild.
Yeah. And
there's been a tremendous change in the incidence of fire in the West since I lived there. I grew up in New Mexico. I lived in Texas. I then lived in California. And the type of weather they're seeing now in terms of fires just didn't exist. So I think, yes, they're going to have to learn a lot of things, but again, a lot of things are very unprecedented in terms of the fires.
But we don't make any changes.
I think that people have already spread out into the danger zones, and it's very difficult, like in a state in California where housing is already a difficult issue, room for enough housing. If you restrict more places where people shouldn't build, we don't actually have laws that say you can't build on your own land in certain places. We just don't do that in the United States. I don't know of any way that we could prevent people except with insurance companies not paying for anything. That would be the only way I think that you could keep people from doing what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Don Reeder. You just unmute yourself, Don. There you go.
Yes, I think the point is that we're concentrating on fire now, but the lack of space for housing is bigger than fire. And it's caused by climate change and the rising sea levels and storms and so on. And the only control is not by law, which unfortunately it doesn't have any effect, but it is in some sense the insurance companies, which can keep the rebuilding out of the future, and they're going to have to build somewhere else to move to. Are we able to both fund and get materials, except maybe ashes, to build the new houses?
I think that some of the things are eaves on the houses. Eaves are bad. That the roofing on the houses, I think some of that is changing. Because that's the fire can, and that, by the way, eaves with a tornado are horrible as well.
Yeah,
If you're in Tornado Alley, you don't want an eave on your house. It'll rip the roof right off.
Yeah.
So something is changing, isn't it? I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah.
I have a question. What about the effect of the geoengineering? So they were going to try to mitigate climate change, or in particular global warming, by throwing out nanoparticles into the air. The MIT Technology Review has talked about this. You guys have heard about geoengineering, I'm sure, right? And some people claim that actually the government's been actively involved in that for a number of years, that it's not just a research curiosity. So there could be like aluminum containing particles in this mix of what they're spewing out, and maybe that's causing some of the flammability. I just want to see what other people think about that.
I'll be talking a little. Go ahead.
I don't think that small scale experiments have anything to do with the dry air and all of the factors going on. I don't think that really has anything to do with the current fires.
Okay, you don't think it's widespread enough?
No.
I think the geoengineering that's going to happen, Lee, is more in the oceans, and I'll touch on that on April the 22nd, Ocean Perspectives. There's a lot more carbon sequestered in the oceans. It's absorbing a lot from the air. And what we need to do is, people are worried about the ocean temperature. We need to worry about the ocean pH. And a lot is being done for that, getting the carbon to various ways to have it stay on the bottom of the ocean bed. But the geoengineering of the air is, as Dottie said, is considered dangerous if it's of any significant effect. And I don't think people dare do that, because anybody who studies it for very long recognizes that, yes, it's one thing to diminish the sun's rays and some of the heat from the sun, but you're doing nothing to stop the acidification of the oceans. And that's the real hooker. If we lose all the corals and a lot of other products in the oceans because of pH, you'd have nothing left but jellyfish and in the oceans if we allow the pH to get much more acidic. So that's the real problem there with geoengineering that might be applied. But to the air, I just don't think it's going to matter or accomplish very much.
Yes, you should be aware that putting nanoparticles into the atmosphere is not particularly good. There's a paper looking at unintended consequences, a column in the Times today or yesterday, about the effect of nanoparticle plastics on the brain.
Yeah.
And how are you going to avoid that by putting it up there to save? We're going to be dumber.
Right. Right.
Dumber than we are already. Well, I just really had a kick out of the discussion we've had so far. Do you guys, everybody give a vote of enthusiasm for doing a book review once a semester? You want to put your hands up, everybody who's keen. Boy, I see a lot of good hands up. Thank you. I welcome.
I couldn't hear what you said, Richard, because my thing was unstable. What were we voting on?
Voting on whether you'd like to do this again sometime.
Oh, sure.
Book review.
Have a book review.
Sure.
A book discussion is better than a book review. We do book reviews. We've done them in the past, but a book discussion is another matter where everybody reads. And I would welcome your input if you find books that you'd like to consider. We can put them on a list and see who gives the highest vote and consider doing it again this fall. But that's a good one. I should mention, without closing off discussion right now, but that we were going to have a tour next week, and Lee Gasper Galvin, of course, planned that tour, and it didn't work out, not to her fault, but so she kindly volunteered to give us a talk on electric vehicles, increasing public awareness and acceptance, trying to beat the misinformation we've had in the past. So that's the plan. We appreciate your willingness to chip in for the replace the tour next Monday, Lee. And
yeah, and it'll just be a discussion. I'm not going to, give a talk, actually. I want you guys to talk as much or more than I do.
Okay, so it'll be kind of like this without the book.
Exactly. Exactly. Everybody participating.
Okay, we can do that.
It'll
That's
be
one thing.
438 pages less.
Right, right.
Right.
That's one thing I have to say about this group. We're a special group, patting ourselves on the back. We have Global Affairs is pretty good too, but they meet on Wednesdays. But we're pretty good at discussing things, and I think today was a good example of that. We had a good discussion. Any more thoughts out there?
Kind of unrelated to that, but I'm going to ask Dottie to send around the Friends of Vision Google Meet info again, because I can't seem to find it. And I have a friend who just is interested in joining. And if everybody's interested in a tiny story here, is my friend who's 85 has a new girlfriend whose name is Corrine. And we met them in Oregon at Sonny's Kitchen Sunday, and then we were going to go up to the Canoecopia thing, which we in fact did. But at breakfast, when we were meeting Corrine for the first time, come to find out that her previous husband, who has passed away, was a nuclear engineer and was involved in plant construction. And she herself had worked inside a nuclear power plant, although she, like Dottie, was a biologist, not a nuclear person. And when they lived in Arizona, they had constructed a log cabin on top of a mountain outside of Prescott, Arizona, from scratch, not even a kit. Carved the road up the mountain and everything. So I was telling her that I was a nuclear evangelist, and she listened intently. She says, "You are the first person I've ever met that is a nuclear evangelist." So it's just an interesting little story. So it's always nice when somebody listens to your story. So,
Richard,
and I also told my friend Nick about PLATO here. I emailed him the information, but I don't see that he came on today. But you may see him show up one of these days. So he's a boat nut like me. So.
Richard, I think you need to let Judy in. Judith.
Oh.
She's tried to get in multiple times.
I don't see where I can let her in. I'm sorry.
I am in. I just want to say something.
Oh, sure. You've been here all along. Okay. Yeah.
I have been trying to say something this whole time.
Oh, I apologize. Just put your hand up.
I
Just
did
put your hand up.
several times, as somebody apparently noticed. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to make a couple of comments about the book.
Please
while
do.
I'm still here. That the two things that struck me were the fire tornadoes in Australia and in California. That the fact that the temperature was so high, the humidity was so low, that in essence there was spontaneous combustion. And it doesn't matter how many firewalls or lines or anything that you put around anything, these things are, going up and over and spreading. And so our whole old way of fighting the fires is not going to work anymore. And just the fact that we have these two examples very recently, this is more an example of how it's going to be in the future, not the old way. And my other comment was about, I really enjoyed the last part of the book too, and the summary. And I wondered if anybody else had the same thought of, what was I doing or what was I thinking back at that time when these first comments about climate change and global warming, they called it back then, were going on. And I just wanted to comment that when I was back at Harvard in 1980, my chairman was into the problem of global warming. And that has stuck with me ever since. How nothing has ever been done about it. Anything, people had these ideas and everybody just ignored everything until now we are where we are. So that's all I want to say. I very much enjoyed the book. And I also agree with Richard. The last part was very enlightening, just to give a whole summary of where we came from. So that's all I wanted to say. It was nothing too important.
Well,
It
very,
was.
very
It was
important
very
as far as
good.
we're concerned. Just
Yeah.
really appreciate. And I apologize for not seeing your hand up, Judy. I've been seeing you there, and I'm very glad that you got our attention. Thank you for sharing. Okay.
Thank you,
Because I
Judy.
never contribute anytime, so I finally had something to say, and I didn't get a chance to say it. So that's all.
So you just did. You're getting a thumbs up from most of us for that.
Just one comment here at the end. I mean, what I'm hearing from a lot of you, these conditions, if we could monitor these conditions from satellite, from other ground-based sensors, and realize when we hit a really dangerous point of all of these coming together and reporting them out, I mean, that would be useful, I would think. It may not stop everything, but it may keep people more alert and more ready to leave. When these fires sweep, you can't pull a trailer out of there. You got to just pick up your pet and get in your vehicle and leave if you can. These things are horrible.
I don't disagree with anything you said, Lewis, but I think we have to recognize that mankind has mental inertia. The things that we know, we carry forward. The things that we don't know are the things that hurt us, and we're blind to the bridge between those two things because we're constantly enjoying the things we already know.
But what's interesting with tornadoes, and Jeff, I'll be real short so you get in here, Jeff. But tornadoes, we see those conditions and they can be reported very quickly and they do save lives. So why can't we do that with these fires to some degree? That's my point.
People rush to see the fire. How stupid can we be?
Right.
I had another question. I was wondering, has anybody heard about the directed energy weapons and what role might that play in any of these particular fires, sometime, here or there?
No comment.
Nobody's heard about that?
I think that's more tied to satellite related weaponry.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering if some of those fires could have been set by those. That's the thing, especially.
I don't think there's any question about where these fires are set. A lot of them are lightning strikes. They're human caused by careless burning. I don't think we have to look into strange sources of fires.
They did rule out UFOs today, though. Did you hear that?
Right.
So at least they're not doing it.
UFOs don't have to come from outer space.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. But wasn't one of the big California fires from utility arcing?
Yes.
Yeah, there was some of that, but that could be monitored constantly.
Well, some of the cables coming down
The
Cables,
big fire in Texas right now, apparently the utility is being blamed for starting that.
Yeah.
The one thing that surprised me was how easily vehicles dragging a chain or a backfire from the exhaust can start these fires. It's far more common than I had any idea about. That, people not intentionally doing anything wrong can be in an area, with their car and accidentally start a major conflagration.
Well, there are a number of car fires just started by the brake seizing and overheating and starting the tire on fire and starting the car on fire.
Yeah.
And
Trucks,
one other point I wanted to make about the history of our knowledge of climate change. He went into, pretty good, as I think Dottie mentioned, that he went into pretty good detail about how long we've known about this. And going back to testifying before Congress in the 50s and onward. And then not only that, but the oil companies setting up climate change or global warming committees or studies, and all these these oil companies have known for 40, 50, 60 years about climate change, and yet they've done nothing but obfuscate. And that's another thing that we're battling against.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Politics.
One other thing I'm afraid of, and several of you mentioned insurance, that they may be dictating some things, but they may be since these fires and these conditions from global change are so widespread, I think all of our insurance is going to go up to some degree. I think it's going to hit us all at some point. And I don't know how fair that is, but that's my fear.
Yeah. True.
I was wondering, how some of these fires have such extremely high temperatures. For example, in Lahaina, it got hot enough to actually melt the windows out of the cars. And I understand that has to be up, around 2,500, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit in order to do that. Am I wrong about that? And how in the world did it get up that high? Because a typical forest fire is only about 1,400 Fahrenheit.
Well, McGrath had that happen to him in this book. He was, you may recall, near the end of the book, he was driving and his windshield melted, and everything in his van started to catch fire, and he had to get out and hide underneath a shovel of some sort, of a tractor shovel. But he got badly burned, but he survived.
That's a miracle he survived through that, because that's extremely hot when it's melting glass.
Yeah. He was in bed.
I think that our author described pretty well the number of fuels in the Canadian fire. I really don't know about the Lahaina fire, what the sources of fuels other than the houses would be. I don't know enough about the trees or what the temperature was like or anything like that. So, I mean, Vaillant, I'm not sure, is it Vaillant?
Vaillant, yeah.
Vaillant makes a pretty good case for how the temperatures could have gotten so hot in the Canadian fire.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't read enough about Lahaina. It was a shock when I first read about it, but it sort of disappeared from the news now. But it's a good point, Lee, that they had some pretty high temperatures too.
Plus, some of the boats out in the harbor caught on fire, and it was kind of curious as to how that fire leapt over the water and got out to those.
Oh, I don't think that happened. I think that was on land. But we'll have to do some looking up.
Yeah.
Maybe well, if you're not too busy, you could check it out, Lee, and let us know next week.
Well,
Yeah,
just-
if we run out of EV stuff to talk about, but I have a feeling we won't.
There you
we
go.
won't, we won't.
There you go.
Just recall the old blacksmiths and the forges. How'd they get those forges so hot? How'd they do that? They had bellows that blew air in there.
That's
So
right.
the winds are going to do
Yep.
something to create some of this temperature.
Yep.
I would
Yep.
think.
Yeah, and that's Judy's point and Dottie's that this is a whole new type of forest fire, the winds. That's where we get this whole idea of fire weather. Yeah, it's really incredible. Oxygen is such a vital component of these fires. And
Right.
well, I think it's just great. And I want to thank you all for your conversations. We'll look forward to meeting next week and hear about electric vehicles. Look forward to it, Lee. And,
Yes, I am too.
thank you all for your participation today. It was
Yeah.
great.
Great job picking this topic, Richard. This is a fantastic topic. You did a great
Yeah,
job.
I don't know how it happened.
Great.
It just sort of fell together.
Thank
But
you.
thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Sorry to Judy for not giving her a chance
Oh, by
to
the way,
talk.
Richard, should we do a dry run sometime later this week?
Sure. It would be good if we could do it the morning of, but if you want to do it, I can give me a phone call or an email. I have a separate Zoom account. We could do it that way if you want.
Okay, and make sure I have your phone number. What's your phone number, Richard? The best number for you?
608-833-5586.
And Richard?
Email is better though. coot42@gmail.com. That's much better. I'm not always near the phone.
Sure.
So,
Somebody else had a
Richard,
comment.
Richard,
Rick,
I think as a host, you might want to use the built-in Zoom hand feature, which raises a hand. Down at the bottom, there's a little hand. And if you do that, then you as a host can see the chronology of when people raise their hand. Then people could talk in order of raising their hands rather than kind of randomly.
That's
We
a
do
very
that
good
in
idea.
other
I
meetings.
have a chat thing and I never used it, but you're right. That's what you mean by the hand. Yeah, I was using chat and I mean, I wasn't using chat. I should have been.
Yeah,
but-
it's built into where is it? Reaction. See the raise hand. If you click on the little circle called reactions,
Okay, yeah, I see that.
see the raise hand, and then you see my little hand up there. Now on my picture, see the hand, top left.
Yep, I see that now. Yep.
And you as the host, if you click on the participants over on the side, you will see the hands come up. So if you
Okay.
click on the participant category there, you'll see
Yep.
all of us over here on the side.
Yep.
And see my hand up there.
Yep, I do.
So you can either see it by the screen or by looking at the participant list and see hands come up. That's
Thank you.
kind of what we use in our other discussion groups.
Thank you. I'm
Okay, so maybe I could use that next week then. Look at the participants and the reactions then, huh?
Yes.
There's Stephen up. He went up and down already.
The home page.
okay.
Richard, I just wanted to add that even though for some reason or other my screen says Judith Pretel, I am Julie, as you know, because we communicate back and forth.
Right, we do.
Okay.
Yeah. I was overridden by that, but thank you for that. I remember that, Julie. Yeah, I remember you very well. You've been with us a long time and I always enjoy your input. So apologize for slipping up a bit today, but I'm glad you got it in when you did.
Well, I do feel a little bit, it's not out, all I can say is outshined by all of the knowledge in everybody else. And so I'm sort of hesitant to say anything, but I enjoy listening to what everybody else says. But I feel hesitant to say anything. So that's.
Well, you were right on today. So thank you, Julie.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, somebody, for noticing.
And,
Yeah.
and just jump in, like
Yes.
next week when we have discussion, just jump in there.
Okay, good point.
Okay.
Okay, thanks all. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Richard, I have something that we might talk about at Friends of Fission tomorrow. Came across an item that says that worms in the Chernobyl area seem to have achieved resistance to ionizing radiation.
That's cool. You're going to tell us tomorrow.
I hope I can find it again.
Okay. I'm not sure if, let me look if, I'm not sure if Dottie has sent us a link. Has she sent us a link already?
I didn't look.
Yeah, I don't think she
so.
sent it. I don't
I
think
didn't-
so. She'll probably get it out later today.
Okay.
Yeah, she has them dated. They're not Zoom, they're
Meets, Google Meets.
yeah, that's right. They're Google Meets and they're separate individual ones. So she'll send them for both the 12th and the 26th, probably this afternoon. If not, I'll send her an email and remind her.
Okay.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
This was
Steve.
very interesting, even though I didn't have the book at all.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good day. It's supposed to be nice out.
Yes, indeed.